Good morning, Sabbath School. Good to see you this morning. Trying something new today. For those of you that are watching, I don't know whether you can see the screens behind me or not, but I have PowerPoint presentation this morning for Sabbath School. The lesson is unto the least of these. And up there, we have the memory text, and after we have our prayer, we're going to read the memory text together. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I'm so thankful that we have technology today that helps us make things even more interesting. And I pray that you'll bless this lesson and help us to find a way to reach out to some of the least of these. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay, our memory text says, then, come on, say it with me.
Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.
Those on his right hand. I wonder, is that just the rich? Is that just the poor? To God, does it make any difference? He is not a respecter of persons. Okay, now let's go to the next one. I can get it going here. Strangers. Strangers in Bible times are individuals who had to leave their homeland, perhaps because of famine, perhaps because of war. Do you remember Ruth and Naomi? Why did their family have to leave and go? Famine. They didn't have any food. They had to go where there was food. And why did Joseph's family have to come from Israel down to Egypt? Famine. There was no food. Today, we have lots and lots and lots of people who are like this. They're strangers in a foreign land. I used to live in Texas. I've never been to El Paso, never needed to go out there. I'll tell you, all these folks are coming not from Mexico, they're coming from way down in South America. Many of them are there because they couldn't live if they didn't come. Some places in South America are very, very, very dangerous. And now they're even telling us, don't go visit those places in Mexico that people always go to visit, because there's people now being abducted. Americans are being abducted and held for ransom. I've been to Cancun. It's a beautiful place. Beautiful place. But there's two Cancun. There's the Cancun of the big hotels that cost a lot of money and wonderful things along the seashore. And then there's the Cancun in the shacks. You know, very, very poor people. And I'm sure there's some of the baser sort there as well. Okay, let's look at the next one then. The equivalent to our day could be the millions of refugees who have become destitute because of circumstances that they could not choose to be in. They didn't want to do that. You know, people want to stay in their homeland. You know, when I lived in many other states in the United States, I couldn't wait to get back to West Virginia because that's where home is, you know? Marty was the same. Wherever we worked, if she had a desk, she had a West Virginia state seal and a dish sitting on her desk. People would make fun of her. And we would tell people there's only two kind of people in the world, you know. Those who live in West Virginia and those who wish they did. Wasn't always understood as we understood it. But nevertheless, homeland. And these folk are leaving home to try to survive, just like they did back in the days of Joseph and back in the days of other Bible characters. Orphans and widows. We are the managers of God's business. God has a business. He says, take care of the orphans, take care of the widows. And he wants us to do it. Do you know any widows? Have you seen any lately? There's one sitting right here I know very well, and she's being cared for wonderfully by Julie. Why does God not say widowers? He expects us to take care of ourselves, I guess. That's the way it is. We are the managers of God's business. Helping the poor is not just an option. He tells us to do it. Don't just think about it, do it. If we're following him, we need to do that. In the past decade, the global refugee crisis has more than doubled in scope. In the last 10 years, in 2022, UNHCR announced that we had surpassed the 100 million mark for total displacement. That means over 1.2% of the whole world population has been forced to leave their home. Among those people are over 32.5 million refugees. God says, help these people. I remember several years ago, one of the jobs I had besides being conference president was Adventist Community Services Director. And they had lots and lots and lots of people that were displaced down in Texas. And they sent a whole bunch of them up to West Virginia. They flew them into Charleston and bused them up to Preston County to the Army base up there. And the General Conference got a hold of me and said, go look about them. So I did. It was a very, very sad situation. These people were sent up here basically with just the clothes on their back. And then they were given a set of clothes, just a shirt and a pair of slacks. And that's what they had. So now they had two, the one they brought and the one that was given them. So they had to keep, every month or so they had to change clothes. And that's all they had. And I ran a warehouse up there. And we had donated stuff, all kinds of stuff. Some of it I had to put in the dumpster. Big sacks of clothes, for instance, with rat's nests in the middle of them and stinking and terrible. Dump in the dumpster and go on to the next sack. But those folk were tickled to death when we would bring them something. I remember one day, this one guy said to me, or one lady said to me, there's a guy that came in and needs a pair of shoes. Okay, we got lots of shoes over in the warehouse. You have any size 16? No, I don't think we have any size 16. She said, he's a big dude. So I said to one of the helpers, I said, I want you to go over to Gabe's. Find a pair of size 16 shoes. She said, I never saw that size 16. I said, well, when you find one, see if you can't put one under each arm and bring them back. And here's the money, buy it. And so she went over there and sure enough, they had a pair of tennis shoes, size 16. And this guy was shocked when he got a brand new pair of size 16 shoes. We are to help these people. Not just say, oh, bless your heart, sorry about that. We're to help them somehow. Now, let's go to the next one. There is estimated that there are over 100 million orphans in the world. I don't even know how that I can even comprehend 100 million orphans. What is an orphan? Somebody that has no parents. Orphans. 100 million of them. How many orphans do we have in the United States? Well, I found this. U.S. adoption and foster care statistics in 2021, according to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, on any given day, over 391,000 children are living in the U.S. foster care system. And the number just keeps rising. I'd love to take one or two or three in my house, but I already have one named Lorna. So I can't do much about that right now. But can you imagine all in the United States? Okay, let's go to the scripture. The life and ministry of Jesus. Someone read Luke 4:16-19 for me. Luke 4:16-19.
And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set them and to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord.
Why do you think Jesus chose that specific scripture when he stood up to read? Why do you suppose he chose that? He was to deal with the poor and all of those other things that he said. Why would those verses in Isaiah be deemed as a message from the Messiah? He quoted from Isaiah, the New Testament hadn't been written yet. What did they reveal about the work of the Messiah? What are some of the things it said, Bill?
Well, his first interest was to take care of those who were really hurting, who needed help.
Take care of those that needed help. That's why Jesus came. I have news for you. He's not here now. He went back home. But he left you and I to do the job that he said needed done. I remember when we had the food pantry downstairs. We had a wonderful time. People would come in, line up. I would have them sitting in the other side over there, and I'd be over there telling them stories and all kinds of stuff. And one after the other, they'd go in where Jim and Gene and others were, and they'd get their stuff. And it was really a fun thing to do. We looked forward to doing it. Then it came to the place that there were several others in town, and it was costing us a good bit of money every month. So we decided to take that money and put it somewhere else. And we missed. And I run into people around town even now that remembers me from the food pantry. Oh, I remember you used to work at the food pantry. Do you still have that? No, we don't have it now. So it was fun to work with the people that had needs. People are still out there. They still have needs. It's not always food. Sometimes it's friendship. And sometimes it's just time. It commonly was thought that poverty was the curse of God and that their unfortunate condition must have been their own fault. I think maybe there's some people today that have that idea, that if you're poor, it's because you're lazy. You know, I remember when I first got my driver's license, Dad had an old Ford car. And I didn't pick up many hitchhikers in those days. You know, I figured, I don't need to do that. And then one day I was out, Marty and I were coming back from somewhere, and that car just stopped. Bam, like that. I was able to coast off the side of the road. You know, I lifted up the hood to intimidate the engine or something. Carburetor had broke right off. So I called my dad. I found a guy that had a phone in a house not far away. And I called him. I said, Dad, your car stopped. The carburetor broke right off. No, that doesn't happen. You just run the radio too long, run the battery down. You know, he had all the reasons why it wouldn't be what I said. I'll get Uncle Slim, that brother, and we'll come look about it. They came, Uncle Slim lifted the hood and said, carburetor broke off. Dad said, can't believe that. You know, why would it break off? But I found out sometimes you need to ride because you need to ride. Have you ever picked up anybody on the road? The car was broken down. As a pastor, I get calls. I remember one in Kansas City. I got a call. This guy said, I'm up here on the interstate and my car's leaking oil everywhere, and please come and help me. Well, that was 10 miles or 15 miles away. I said, okay, what's your car look like? And he told me it was a 1956 Ford. That was old even in those days. This is in the mid 80s. And I said, 56 Ford. So I drove up there, and sure enough, the oil light sending switch was leaking like crazy. So I said, well, let me see what I can find. And I went down to the parts house, and they said, no, we don't have that for a 56 Ford. So I went to a junkyard, and the guy said, you know, the new Mustang uses the same one. So then I went back and got one from a new Mustang. I got several quarts of oil, came back, fixed his car, filled it with oil, and sent him on his way. You know, he was in a jam, a real jam. He needed help. It was such a blessing to help him. Such a blessing. And I've got lots more stories like that. As a pastor, you end up with those kind of things. So, homeless and hungry. There are times, and I understand that, there are times you see somebody that is, they say, I'm a veteran and I'm hungry and I need money, and they collect all the money that they can and go around the corner and drive away in their Cadillac. That sometimes happens, but we can't judge everybody because of some oddball like that. I'd rather help him when he doesn't need help than to refuse somebody that really does need help. Does that make sense? Okay, now, let's see, there's another text there, I think, somewhere. James 1:27, that's where it is. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this. Wow. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this. What is it? Visit the orphans and widows in their trouble, but keep yourself unspotted from the world. Visit. Do we still visit widows and orphans? Or does it say, stand and wait until they come to you? Is that what it says? Where to go find them? Widows and orphans. Marty was giving Bible studies to a widow that lives out in Knoxville area. And I still kind of keep in touch with her. She was dependent upon her brother, who was her neighbor. Her brother just died a while back. Now she is really at a loss. So I try to help her in a little bit that I can. Look around, find somebody, reach out to them. You're doing the work that God has asked you to do. Okay, God's provision for the poor. I want you to look at this now. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow. What's that mean? Lie fallow.
Not collected the fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, just leave it alone. If things grow up, let the poor have it. You know, I've got 12 apple trees. Some years they produce like crazy, other years they don't, because apple trees produce about every other year. You know, this year I'm gonna spray them. I've not sprayed them for a few years. And, you know, I may have a crop, I may not, but we'll find out as time goes on. But normally I give my fruit away. I make some applesauce, because I love applesauce. Lie fallow, and the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. Well, we don't have vineyards and olive groves around here so much. We do have tomato patches, we do have corn, we do have stuff like that. So it's an interesting thing. Have you ever gleaned in a field? You know what I mean by gleaning? I remember Marty and I were down near Uvalde, Texas one time, and we looked along the road, and there was a field, and they were harvesting it with a big machine. Marty said, "Stop, stop, stop. That looks like kale." Kale? I mean, this field went out of sight. And right next to it was another one that was something different, and it went out of sight. And if you know Marty, she's so shy. She got out of the car, went over to the man and said, "What are you doing with all this stuff left on the ground?" He said, "Well, you know, the harvester just don't get it all, so we'll just fill it in." She said, "Can I glean?" "Why?" He said, "If you want to, take all you want." We happened to have a big black trash bag in the car. I used it to, if I had to get down to change the tire or something, I had something to put on the ground. So I just had it in there all the time. She grabbed that thing, and the next thing you know, she was filling it clear to the top with kale. Stuffed it down in. She took it home and worked, and we had enough kale to last for years. Didn't cost us anything. He said, "Work." She had to go out there, and I helped her. I held the bag, and she stuffed the stuff in. So, you know, gleaning works. It really works. Okay. Here's another one. Leviticus 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of the field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. You know, there was a time when I lived on an island in Chesapeake Bay, and there was a guy there that was a farmer. He was an elder of our church, and I would help him sometimes. Well, one day we were out there and we were planting corn. Big field on this island, big island. And he said, "Now, Randy, don't go too close to the edge. It's 50 feet down to the water. And sometimes it kind of cuts under like this, so don't go too close to the edge." I said, "Okay." So I was planting corn. Round and around, you know how much fun it is to drive a tractor. I happened to be back there when it was time to reap, and I was driving the combine. He let me do the fun things. I was going down there picking corn, and all of a sudden I looked up ahead of me and I thought, this ain't good. 9 rows went right off the edge. So that much of that island had washed away between planting and harvesting. I kind of backed up and came over this way and went around. So there are times when you don't mess with what's at the edges. And that's what this is saying. The middle of the field is where he got his harvest. He didn't go around the fences, if there were fences, or what do they use for fences in some parts of the United States? Osage orange trees. And just leave that stuff there. People will get them. You know the story of Ruth and Boaz? Remember? That's how Ruth met her husband. She was out gleaning in his field. I think that's a picture of her right there. Maybe not. There's too many others working with her. Okay. It goes on to say, for the poor you never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, say. Is that a suggestion? He says, I command you, say. You shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, to your needy in your land. Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and the needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. You know anybody that's poor? Here in America, it is hard to find a poor person. If you think about it, I've traveled many parts of the world and I have found some people who are really poor, trying to get food out of the garbage. Didn't have enough to eat. None of us look like we're starving to death. You know, we have plenty to eat. If you don't believe it, go downstairs after a bit. We'll have plenty of food. And, we have heat in our buildings. I remember in Kansas City, I had a man that I found that had 6 children. His wife had died. They were living in an abandoned house. The windows were broken out in the dead of winter. Huddled in a corner with blankets around them. They were poor. He was having a terrible time trying to feed those 6 kids. He didn't have much of a job, and he didn't want to leave them by themselves, but he had to. Poor. Really poor. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. I hesitate to tell you this. When I was pastoring in Indiana, there was a family there that had an attractive daughter who disappeared. She just disappeared. She all of a sudden was gone. Report to the police and everything, they couldn't find her. Finally, one of her friends said, I heard from her, she's in Chicago. What is she doing in Chicago? The father hired a private detective who went to Chicago and found her. She'd gone up there to get a job. And when she got her job, she found out that she was a prostitute. There was a man who owned her. He beat her regularly if she didn't bring in enough money. The private detective contacted her and said, I came to bring you home. Oh, she said, I can't come home. Why can't you come home? Because the man said he would kill my family if I left. He knows where I'm from. He'd find them and he'd kill them. I know him. How do you help a girl like that? She eventually came home. I don't remember it after I left, but she was just a shell of what she was before she left. Here it says, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. She couldn't speak for herself. She loved her mom and dad, but she went up there to find a job where she could help. You never go to a strange city for a job you don't know anything about, especially if you're an attractive young lady. It's more than just giving. He who gives to the poor will starve to death. Is that what that says? If you give to the poor, God won't let you starve. You won't even, not even lack for anything. I remember wanting to start a Spanish congregation in Kansas City. 17,000 people lived in a place called Argentine, and it was not the Seventh-day Adventist Church for Spanish people. And I was really wanting to start one. But I didn't speak Spanish. I had 6 or 8 Spanish believers in my congregation. And then I heard about the Mariel boat lift. All those people that were kicked out of Cuba. And I heard that the largest church in Cuba, the pastor, was now up at Andrews, he and his wife. I called up there and to an interpreter, I talked to them. Would you be willing to come to Kansas City and help me start a Spanish church? See, what's that mean?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Now I had to take my little station wagon that I had at the time, and I went to Andrews, and I brought them back to Kansas City. When they were thrown out of Cuba, they could only take what they wore. They couldn't bring a suitcase, a purse, nothing. So they wore 2 pair of pants, 2 shirts, you know how it is. And that's how I met the Chavianos. They came down to Kansas City, moved right into the house with Marty and I. Their brothers and sisters did today. He had Marty's too. They contact me regularly, wanting to know when I'm coming down to Georgia to visit them. You know, I don't know how I would live without knowing those dear people. And there's many others out there. You just need to know. And I've had no lack. I've given them help when they were first here. You know what a soaker hose is, Bill? A soaker hose?
No.
It's one of those hoses you lay out in the garden that goes all from one end to the other.
Yeah.
We found a house for these folk to live in. And they had to have a cat. They just thought of having a cat, cat's meow. But the cat got under the porch, way back up under the house up in there, wouldn't come out. Well, Ignacio found there was a hose hanging in the garage. So he thought, I'll just hook it up and go back and squirt that cat out. He'd never heard of a soaker hose. So here he was, and he had that hose up, from stem to stern, and he told Anna Rosa, turn it on! Turn it off! The cat never moved, but he came out in a hurry. Anyway, we've had so much fun helping the people. And we've never shown any lack. Okay, blessed is he who considers the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. I need to be delivered in time of trouble. God says, you help the poor, you deliver us. Now here's something that maybe you know or don't know. You know what social Darwinism was? I'll put this in here. There's old Charles there now. In England, many thought that not only was there no moral imperative to help the poor, but that it was, in fact, wrong to help them. Social Darwinism believed that it would be detrimental to society to help the poor, the sickly, and indigent, because if they multiplied, it only weakened the social fabric of the nation as a whole. It's terrible. You don't want to help the poor. They'll just multiply like rats. In that same place in England, during that same time, there was a man by the name of George Mueller. Have you ever heard of George Mueller? Here's a picture of old George. He cared for and educated over how many orphans? 10,000 orphans in Victorian Bristol during his life from 05 to 1898. 10,000 orphans. And he never asked for money. money came to him. Tens of thousands of dollars came to him. God saw to it that there was no lack. 10,000 orphans. You know, imagine. Okay, Dennis, would you and your wife take 5 orphans? You know, you're well blessed, you're retired and everything, got lots of time, lots of money now that you're retired. I mean, to take 5 orphans, how do you clothe them and feed them and educate them and all of that? George took 10,000. 10,000. I can't even comprehend 10,000 orphans. You can see some of them sitting there, I see. Now, Matthew 19, 16 to 22. Someone read that for me. Matthew 19, 16 to 22. I'm not sure this is a picture of the actual rich young ruler, but he does look like one, doesn't he? You know the story, don't you? Someone read 16 to 22 for me.
Now, a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me what is good?" Jesus replied. "There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, obey the commandments." "Which ones?" the man inquired. Jesus replied, "Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." "All these I have kept," the young man said. "What do I still lack?" Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth.
Question is, what did Jesus mean when he said to him, "If you will be perfect, go and sell what you have and give it to the poor. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. And come and follow me."
That's what he's lacking.
He once said to James and John and Peter and others, "Come, follow me." Their names are on the foundation of the New Jerusalem. Did they have any lack? Peter was a fisherman. He needed some extra money, and God said, "Just throw the net over the side." "Well, I've been fishing all night, and they don't catch fish in the daytime. They can see the net. You fish at night. Throw the net over the side." "Well, if that's what you want me to do, that's what I'll do." So he threw the net over the side, and what happened? Well, so many fish, they were trying to pull it in, the net was trying to break. He couldn't believe it. There will be no lack in my life or in yours if we follow what Jesus asked us to do. I don't know what this rich young ruler might have been, but he would have been an apostle, probably. "Come and follow me." He didn't know what he was losing. Now, I can see somebody saying, "Well, yeah, but he was a rich young, and he was a ruler, so he probably had lots of employees that he was responsible for. He probably had a big family that he was responsible for. He had lots of responsibilities, and he wanted to make sure they were cared for." Did Jesus not know that? Of course, if that was true, he knew that. If it were not true, he knew that too. He said, "Look, sell everything you got and give it to the poor." When Peter came to follow Jesus, he didn't sell his boat, because later he said, "I go fishing." He went back to his boat temporarily. But God realized that there's times you're up and there's times you're down. Then it says, For whosoever will save his life will lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake in the Gospels, the same will save it. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? What is salvation worth to you? Do you even understand what salvation means? Sometimes I don't think I even really understand. Eye hath not seen and ear heard, neither has it entered into the mind of man what God hath prepared for those that love him. But this one thing I know, whatever it is, I don't want to lose it. I told Marty, walk slow on the path. Won't be long, I'll catch up to you. Okay, let's go to the next one now. Here's Jesus looking up at a guy in a tree. Zacchaeus. What kind of a tree did he climb? Have you ever seen a sycamore tree that grows in the Holy Land? It's nothing like the ones we have here, I'll tell you. I saw one. It's a member of the fig family. It's got sticky goo on, coming out oozing here and there, and spikes about 1.5 inches long. To climb that, you had to really want to be up there. And here was a rich man. Zacchaeus was a rich man too, with his robes and everything. But he went up that gooey, sticky tree with all those big spikes on it. Why? He wanted to see Jesus, and he was a short little guy, and he couldn't see over the crowd. So he had to get up higher so he could see. Most people don't know that about the sycamore tree in the Holy Land. It's a very interesting thing because it mentions exactly what tree it was. Do you suppose he'd have mentioned if it was an oak tree? That's just an easy climb tree. Maple tree, easy climb tree. Sycamore tree? Who would want to climb that? Zacchaeus. That's who wanted to climb that. What were the differences between the rich man's experience with Jesus and that of the rich young ruler? They both were rich. What's the difference between Zacchaeus and the ruler?
One was generous and one wasn't.
And Jesus offered the same to both. One said, no thanks, I got plenty. This one, I gotta have it. Whatever it is you're offering, I gotta have it. Then it goes on, it says, the rich young ruler had turned away from Jesus. The disciple had marveled at their master, saying, how hard is it for them that trust in riches to enter the kingdom of God? Another way of saying it is, it's impossible for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven and keep his riches. Had they exclaimed to one another, then who can be saved? Because remember, in their culture, to be rich was blessed of God. To be poor was cursed of God. And if the rich man can't get into heaven, who can get there? They thought. Dennis, you and I are both retired. We know what it's like to be rich, don't we?
Yeah.
Now they had a demonstration of the truth of Christ's words. The things which are impossible with men are possible with God. They saw how through the grace of God, a rich man could enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's our age, 555. They could see now a rich man could make it. Zacchaeus. He said to Zacchaeus, come down. I want to go to your house today. I want to go eat with you. Jesus never said that with me, but I think he would, because I'm as needy as anybody. And that's who he was looking for, people who had need. I don't need more to eat. I got plenty to eat. I have a nice bed to sleep in, warm home, all those things. But the greatest needs that we have are not those kind of things. God has blessed me with decent health at my age. For that, I'm thankful. I'm not an old man. I just had 84 birthdays. That's all. Now, look at the next one. You know this guy too. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Let's back up a little bit. The beginning of the book of Job said there was a time when the sons of God came and met together. And the Lord looked around and he saw representatives of all kinds of places, I guess, and he saw Satan sitting there and said, what are you doing here? I'm the king of the earth. I came to represent the earth. Then God says, how about Job? There is none like him in the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. Even if he was covered with sores from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Even if he had lost everything, his family, his wealth, his wife even looked at him and said, curse God and die. You're no good for anything anymore. He was in a hard place. What did Job say? Do you remember?
He gives me up through all of them.
He never gave up his faith in God just because of all these calamities that were happening around him and to him and with him. Then it goes on to say, I searched out the case and I did not know. Do not wait for them, the poor, to call your attention to their needs. If we're following him, we'll notice them. Now, there are people out there who think they're poor that are not poor. You know? I know there were people coming to the food pantry that went to all the food pantries in town, and then they sold some of the stuff that they got to buy alcohol or tobacco or things that their food stamps wouldn't allow them to buy. We knew that. I've even gone to somebody's house, and back when I was growing up, we had, they would give us big things of cheese. You ever remember seeing those things? Big things of cheese. And they'd give other stuff, big quantities of them. A big roll of, what was that? Well, it was pork anyway, a big roll, looked like lamb, that's all I can think of now. Anyway, the big rolls of those things. I've been to people's houses where they had a refrigerator full of that stuff. Well, you don't get that at one time, so they got it from somebody else. They bought it from them, so they could then take the money and go buy something else. It just happened. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't help the poor just because they are not honest. Always. Okay. Then it says, act as did Job. The thing that he knew not, he searched out. Go on an inspecting tour and learn what is needed and how it can be best supplied. Testimony of the Church, Volume 5, page 151. Have you gone on any inspection tours lately to see if people are in need? I haven't. I wish I need to do that. Mike, you have a need selling your property. That's not the kind of need I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of need where people are destitute. destitute. I've gone into people's homes before as a pastor. Walked in the kitchen and opened the cupboard. Almost nothing in there. And they wouldn't tell me. They thought I was kind of bold, walk in the kitchen and open the cupboard. Sometimes before I went to one of those places, I had a big box of food in the car, just in case I found somebody. Aha! I found somebody. Then I'd go out and bring a box of food. Do you suppose anybody say, "Oh, no, I don't want that"? Oh, they were tickled to death to get it. They were too ashamed to say, "My kids have nothing to eat." Isaiah 58, 6-8. This is not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. It is not to share your bread. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry? I just happen to know I got some bread. Now what am I gonna do? None of you look hungry. Share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring in your house the poor who are cast out. Shavianos for some. And when you see the naked, that you cover them, and not hide yourself from your own flesh. There was a terrible, terrible, terrible snowstorm in Indiana when I was there. It was about 4 foot deep. To open the roads, the snowplow couldn't do anything. It had a great big front end loader. That's the only way they could get one lane open so an ambulance or something could go. I had a person that worked at the hospital. She called me and she said, "Pastor, you need to come up here to the Tipton Hospital. There's a family I want you to meet." Well, there was enough road open, 12 miles for me to go up there, so I went up and I met this family. The father worked at a transmission plant and he couldn't get home because of the snow. The wife was at home with 2 little boys. The house caught on fire. She grabbed a blanket, a pair of gloves for one of the kids. She had to hurry. She got her coat. She got just a few things. And there was a house across the field, way over there. We've got to get out of here. She could have gone out to the garage, which was across, wouldn't have burned, and you'd gotten out of the land. But, she didn't think about that. She headed off across the field. Snow this deep, crust on the top. They could walk on the crust until they got way out there in the middle, and then she went under her arms. Here she was now. She couldn't get out. She was hugging the littlest boy. The other boy said, "Mommy, I'll go get help." She said, "No, I hate to see you go. What am I going to do?" And she looked up in the swirling snow, she said, and said, "God, if you're up there, save my children." Then she heard something coming across the field from that house. They had a 6-wheel drive old army truck. Had 2 on each side in the back and 1 in the front, kind of like a gator, And here it came through the snow. It almost ran over them because it didn't see them because of the swirling snow. But here it was right there. Loaded them in. Pulled her up out of the snow. But the one little boy's hands, he didn't have gloves, and they froze. They got him over there, got him to the hospital where Dad worked. And that's where I went to see him. this woman, her hair had frozen to her face. So she had big places on her face from the freezing. They took 2 slits in the boy's belly and put his hands inside to grow new skin. Can you imagine? They lost everything they had. They didn't have any clothes. Father's, all of his stuff was burned up. So we got him, took him down to the community service building we had, got clothes for him, clothes for his family, found him a place to live until they could get out of the hospital. That one of the boys' hands were frozen, his fingers quit growing. He had little stubby fingers on his hands. Years later, they sent me a picture of him playing Little League baseball. His hand was hardly big enough to reach around the baseball, but he was playing. And we stayed friends for years and years after that. They came to our house one time. They were so happy that they had had that help. I'm telling you, they had needs. It wasn't assumed needs, it was needs. And I'm just so glad that God has given us a way that we could help from time to time. Then he goes on and says, and when your light shall break forth like the morning, your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Are you willing to follow Jesus? He's out there. He's finding those people. He wants to know, are you willing to follow him? I guess that's closing out our lesson today. It was a different kind of a Sabbath school lesson, I know. But I hope it helped. Let's pray. Father God, we're so thankful for Jesus. He has shown us the way. He has told us what to do. He said, if they're not right around you, go look for somebody that you can help. Bless them in every way that you know. In Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for watching, everybody.